How does the new variant change or not change that dynamic from what you're starting to see in South Africa and maybe some of the numbers in the UK and elsewhere?
Yeah, I'm already talking with employers of different sizes in the United States who are rethinking their mask policy. Most employers had if you're fully vaccinated, hadn't included a booster in that definition, Andrew. So I think that's critical. But if you're fully vaccinated, then you don't need to wear a mask. And that's been a pretty common theme. And I think that's also kind of resonant with what I would expect as somebody who's immunized, that I'm safe. I've seen a lot more employers now putting masks back in. They've also been moving a lot more of their larger gatherings back to Zoom, kind of taking that virtual posture for anything that involves more than, say, 5 or 6 people. And then I think third, a lot of people are reconsidering, hoping the CDC will take action first, but reconsidering the definition of fully immunized to include that booster dose to provide that extra protection in the hopes that masks and other mitigation procedures could come off soon.
Does that change the dynamic for you? Meaning, if you were to require workers in a conference room for everybody to be boosted, would that change how you feel about the mask component or no?
I do. I think that especially now looking not just at the Pfizer data, there's 3 other studies. There's 4 studies total. And it's not just the Omicron variant, Andrew. It's also that real world data prior to Omicron that we saw with the effectiveness of that third dose in all of the settings involved, older, young, et cetera. I do think that it makes a pretty critical difference. I've been telling people you don't have to wait for the CDC. You can make these decisions on your own. It's interesting, though. There seems to be some resistance to that third dose. People feel like it's, quote unquote, not essential, including employers. But again, looking to the CDC, hopefully to have enough data to change that definition, possibly as early as January or February.
So that's what I was going to ask you. By the time the CDC changes, if they will change it, I think it's almost inevitable that they will change it.
Right.
The question is when, and are they doing it too late?
Yeah, that's usually what we see with the CDC is that we do feel like it's too late, which is why I've been trying to, many of us in public health have been trying to encourage people to take these actions voluntarily. You are seeing some cities, New York City and others, who are putting out this guidance that, you should include boosters in what we would consider full immunization for especially high-risk settings, including healthcare settings. However, nobody has gone that extra step of requiring it. I think that will change, and especially for nursing homes, this seems like a no-brainer, Andrew, given the infections we see in some of the congregate settings we've talked about here, including schools. This feels like it will happen before the CDC takes action. But interestingly enough, that 16 to 17-year-old booster recommendation, that wasn't something that any of us expected. And I think that indicates some of the sense of urgency to make sure that people understand boosters are necessary. In the 16 to 17-year-old range, remember, they're still optional. The CDC used the word may versus should for 18 and above, but I suspect that'll change as well.
Yeah, Dr. Patel, that was going to be my point. They have been kind of behind the 8 ball and behind the curve on some of this stuff. But it does seem like the measure yesterday with 16 and 17-year-olds, it's kind of stepping up in that urgency because not only did the FDA pass it, surprising people, the CDC passed it a few hours later without checking with the advisory board. Same thing with just kind of earlier this week with the immunotherapy being allowed for patients as a preventative measure if you're immunocompromised, for those monoclonal antibodies. It just seems like there is some urgency that's picking up, and maybe they've heard the complaints and are following through.
Yeah, and I think the FDA and CDC has made it clear that they'll do everything to kind of fast track, so to speak, any Omicron-specific vaccine development. They're also we're all waiting with bated breath on the Pfizer antiviral oral pill because that just seems to hold such strong promise for both vaccinated and possibly unvaccinated and possibly vaccinated individuals. So we're hearing about so many things that the agencies are trying to do, and they are. I think that it's just always, when we see news developing, we want things to happen quickly, and they have a process that they follow, not necessarily at the speed we would like, but they're committing to doing it as quickly as possible. I hope we see some of those developments in January as well, the oral antivirals. And as you mentioned, Becky, that pre-exposure prophylaxis monoclonal antibody, a 1 injection intramuscular AstraZeneca product has pretty incredible data, but limited to severely immunocompromised people, about 2 to 3% of the population. But that could be a game changer for patients who don't mount any response, organ transplant, people in CAR T cell therapy, people on chronic steroids or TNF inhibitors, some of those drugs for rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and MS and cancer. Big game changers just in time for the holidays, hopefully.